I am in this race until the end. Tonight, those are the words from President Biden. We will not back down. Those are the words from the Vice President, Kamala Harris, and the First Lady echoing it all.
Joe is the Democratic nominee, and he is going to beat Donald Trump just like he did in 2020.
But also tonight, the hole for President Biden growing wider. A stunning poll after a disastrous debate performance. A meeting this hour with Democratic governors and calls from Capitol Hill for the president to get out. Plus, we'll share with you why, for the first time in quite some time, it is Donald Trump who is sitting back and watching the circus. And look who is talking now about a possible second Trump term. Ivanka. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Good evening, I'm Blake Berman. Welcome to Washington and the site of a potential political reckoning. Tonight, the president defiant, the White House adamant. They say the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party isn't going anywhere. NewsNation is told on a campaign call today, both President Biden and the vice president said their campaign is moving forward together. But there are real questions about if and how that can be the case. President Biden, we are told, has now spoken with key Democratic leadership and in 30 minutes will convene a shotgun meeting with Democratic governors to try to shore up support at the White House. A brand new New York Times poll today shows part of the peril for the president. He is losing to Donald Trump by 8 points in a heads-up race and by 7 in an expanded field among registered voters, according to that poll. Last night at a fundraiser, the president blamed travel on his debate performance. And when the White House was asked today about if the 81-year-old president naps daily, the press secretary said this.
Let me be very clear about this. This is a president that wakes up every morning and puts the American people first. That's what he does. He does that every single day. That is his focus. I am not going to speak to sources out there, unnamed sources out there.
That from the White House today. So far, 2 Democratic lawmakers have called on the president to leave, but more are coming forward saying they think he will lose if he stays in the race. There are also reports of a letter circulating potentially by several Democratic lawmakers who could call for the president to get out of the race. So what will Democrats do now as the calls for the president to step aside grow? We begin tonight with the Democratic Congressman Nickel, who joins us live from his home state and the potential swing state of North Carolina. Congressman, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. We always love speaking with you. Thanks for the time. Joe Biden, the president, should he withdraw from this race? Yes or no, as you see it, Congressman?
You know, I think what I see is a conversation that's focusing on Joe Biden instead of talking about Donald Trump and his disastrous 4 years as president. But the questions about whether Joe Biden is up to the job are very fair. I think it's important.
I hear about the conversation, Congressman, but it's a yes or no, right? Should he withdraw from the race? What is your view?
I think what he needs to do is he needs to get out there in front of the American public. He needs to answer the tough questions, no holds barred from reporters. He needs to come to places like North Carolina's 13th district and talk to Democrats, Republicans, and independents, so they know that he's up for the job. That's the first thing that he needs to do, and he needs to do it soon.
I take it the answer from you then is no at this point in time?
The answer is we should be talking about Donald Trump, not about Joe Biden, and we are, because he hasn't put this issue to rest. And the only way he can do that is if he gets out there in front of the American people, talking to folks like you on NewsNation, answering the questions about whether he's up to the job. I believe he is. I don't think we're there yet. But right now, if the White House is listening, if the president's listening, he needs to get out there and make the case himself.
So talking about making the case, that New York Times poll, Congressman, 31% only believe that he should remain the nominee. 34% approve of his job as president. 34% say he made the country better since taking office. Only 36% have a favorable approval rating. 74% agree that he is too old to be president. Translation there, Congressman, 2/3 of the country says he didn't do a good job and 3/4 of the country says he is too old. Is he your best option?
He is our Democratic nominee for president right now, And I think it's important to step back and remember, this is an election against a convicted felon who would be a disaster for this country, and we've got to do everything we can to stop Donald Trump. I'm very hopeful that Joe Biden's up to the task, but it was a bad debate, and he's got to prove to the American public that he can do the job, and that's, I think, where we are right now. I want to see
Can he beat Donald Trump?
Well, I think, you're talking about polls that are not good. We should be ahead against someone who is a true threat to democracy. He tried to overthrow the federal government after he lost an election fair and square. I'm very concerned, but, I think, again, the place I keep coming back to is legitimate questions about whether Joe Biden can do the job, and I want to see him answer those tough questions.
You come November 5th, Joe Biden's beating Donald Trump in your view?
Come November 5th, Donald Trump is nowhere near the Oval Office. That's the view I have. That's the hope I have, because I don't think our democracy can stand 4 years of Donald Trump.
Can Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump if it gets to that one-on-one?
I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're ready to really get into that kind of conversation about hypotheticals. Right now, Joe Biden is our nominee for president, and he gave a great speech in my home state of North Carolina right after the rally, after the debate. But we haven't seen him really since.
So let me
then.
ask you.
Yep.
Yeah, no, and let me just leave you with this, Congressman, and I appreciate you being here because, as you might know, not a lot of your colleagues are talking and want to answer these questions, but I've heard you now say a couple times, right now. What moves you from right now to move on, like two of your Democratic colleagues?
Because I think you've reported it. You're going to see more of my House Democratic colleagues call on President Biden to withdraw from the race. That
is it a couple dozen as you know it, or?
Well, there's two right now, and there will be more within the next week, within the next few days. And until he can go and put those concerns to bed, you're going to hear more of this noise. You're going to hear more of this, of this distraction from what a disaster Donald Trump would be. And that's my focus. I want to beat Donald Trump, and I want to put this story to bed. And I can't do it. Joe Biden's the one that's got to do it.
We'll leave it there. Congressman Nickel from the state of North Carolina, thank you for being with us here on the Hill. Hope you and your family have a happy 4th, sir.
Same to you.
You got it. All right, joining us here on the Hill tonight, Chris Stirewalt, host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official, Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor, and Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Hello to you all before the burgers and the hot dogs and the fireworks. Oh boy, Chris. The New York Times reporting today, quote, Biden told Ally that he is weighing whether to continue in the race, as you just heard there from the congressman right now. And he expects more Democrats to come out. What is before the president this evening? And as you see it, where does he go from here?
So the miracles of modern polling have delivered a very painful moment for the president. I was expecting it would be next week before we got high-quality polls, but we've got the New York Times Siena poll. Right. We've got the Wall Street Journal out with a poll. And this is building. I'll put it like this.
Okay.
The Overton window, the what is possible gets big fast, right? The space of what might happen gets big fast. And you start a week ago, and you're like, there's no way, there's no chance. And you just nudge it open, and you nudge it open. And when you have members of Congress, and what I heard from Nickel as clear as possible was, there's a letter, and next week I'm going to sign it. If I'm not satisfied, it's going around, it's going to happen, and the list is going to grow. And if you decode what the congressman said, I've been offered to sign the letter. I haven't signed it yet. But if we get to next week, and so the president has an enormous amount on the line between now and, let's say, Tuesday.
To your point, one of my favorite quotes is risk happens fast.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where we are right now. I heard from the White House today, Kurt, a full defense of the president. I also heard from the White House, Kurt, in the recent days that all those videos about President Biden that you see, they're cheap fakes. Don't believe them because they're cheap fakes. Translation, they're lies. And then we saw the debate Thursday night. How do we believe anything out of that White House podium now and in the future when it comes to the defense of the president and his health?
Well, it's always one of those classic things where what else is the White House press secretary going to do but give a full-throated defense of her boss? That's her job. And that is the thankless job of the White House press secretary, and we see it in multiple administrations, to go out there and, frankly, say things definitively that you know that's probably not exactly 100% true or how it's going to play out. That's unfortunately the job. And it's interesting because the congressman talked about, I wish we were talking about Donald Trump and his, quote, disastrous debate performance and all that. And as a Democrat, yeah, I wish we were talking about that too. And there's a world in which that could happen. But here's the problem with the current way that we have it. Every single time from here to November that there is a misspeak, a misstep, a gaffe, it will revive this conversation about Joe Biden's age, mental acuity, and fitness.
And I would say the White House initially told us don't believe that stuff. Right. And that's part of the box that they're put in now. This was as I use the word defiant, they were behind the president today. It is their job, but I wonder what you took of it as someone who has been covering this nonstop and is at the White House daily.
I mean, it was nonstop today. I mean, there was the White House staff call with Zions reassuring them, pep talk. Yep. There was the call with the campaign that POTUS and the VP went on and said, as you quoted off the top, that we're staying in this. And then there was the reporting coming out, as you mentioned, from the New York Times, saying Biden was saying to allies, these next few days are crucial for me staying in the race. Immediately, the White House spokesperson, Andrew Bates, says this is false.
Right.
But then ABC came out with something.
That's what I'm saying. Like, when they say this, And
I actually think that that it's not better orchestrated, because don't you think that they were behind the New York Times article as well? You don't let that leak unless that was somebody trustworthy that the New York Times was.
I mean, and it's like Kurt said, they're going to continue to stand behind him. And I was just talking with a source saying that you're going to, even when you know you're losing the game, you're going to keep saying you're going to win the game until the very end.
And it's like Team Ron DeSantis was saying, we're going to win this thing, even though we all knew he was going to get out of it.
Here's what I want to ask you, Ashley, as a Republican, and I'll get your reaction on the other side. New RNC ad out today, and look at who it focused on.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
RNC not talking about Joe Biden. They're reminding folks it could be her.
And there's a lot of good data and good clips like that they can run against Kamala all day long. I mean, that's the problem with the Democrats are facing right now, is she's not any better of a candidate, if not worse. So what do they do? But I think everyone thinks she is the heir apparent.
Right. All right, come on in. Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Mick, let's separate you. You are a Republican. You are also one of the few people that is a former White House Chief of Staff, right? You disagree with President Biden's policies. We can set that to a side. That is a conversation for another day. But you have been warning about this as a former White House Chief of Staff for close to 2 years now. Remind me of what you've been saying and why it caught your attention then.
Sure. It caught my attention back, I think it was in October of 2022, when Joe Biden at a public event looked around the room and asked for Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, who had died about 2 weeks before, and he had actually spoken about that on a couple of different occasions. And it wasn't my role as a former White House Chief of Staff. It was my role as the son of a mother who has gone through dementia. And that was one of the giant red flags that we saw in my family. And then as you started looking more closely at Joe Biden, you saw the black eyes. You saw the shuffling when he walks. You saw the disoriented sort of nature when you're up on stage and so forth. And any family who has been through dealing with somebody with mental incapacity or diminishing mental capacity, maybe better said, has seen these things. And we know what they are, and we know how quickly the deterioration can come. So I have been stunned for the last 2 years that more folks have not raised this issue in some of the left-leaning press, because anybody who's seen this in their own family can see it in Joe Biden.
Put on your Chief of Staff hat for a second, because it was a flurry at the White House today, and it's not going to stop tomorrow, even though it's July 4th, and in the days and weeks after. What do you think the White House is dealing with tonight to try to position the president for the upcoming days?
Yeah, the place is on fire. They need somebody to step up, whether or not it's Jill Biden or Jeffrey Zients or somebody to step up and say, look, here's what we're going to do, A, B, and C. And one of those things has got to be a 2-hour-long unscripted press conference. You saw the CNN anchors asking for that the other day. So the fear, of course, is that either there's nobody in the White House who can do that, or the people in the White House don't want to do it, or more likely, the president simply isn't capable of doing that and would just reaffirm what we've seen here since the debate. So, look, it's gotten worse since the debate. The messaging has been terrible. You're seeing now, by the way, and you asked about Karine Jean-Pierre. Yes, you expect the White House press office to defend the president without reservation. But they have to have credibility in doing so. And when you lose that credibility, it's time to move on. We went through several in the White House. They listen, the building is on fire. There's no question. I'm not sure they can put it out. We'll know a lot more after the governor's meeting tonight.
Right. All right, Mick, we'll see you in about 15 minutes for Hot Mic with Mick. Ivanka Trump reappearing and talking about a potential second term for her father. Your insights on why she said it now, and what it could potentially mean. See you in about 15 minutes' time. Thanks, Mick.
Yeah, we're also going to compare my shirt with Steyerwalt's bow tie.
We'll get there on the Wednesday evening before the 4th. But before then, and still to come, should those who work outside when it gets hot be given mandatory breaks? Why the White House now wants to make that case, what it could mean for workers and your wallet. But first, on the other side of the break, Steyerwalt is going to break down. We got the New York Times poll at like 2 Eastern, 1:30 Eastern this afternoon, and what it all means and what you initially take from it.
I have conclusive evidence based on what's on the wall behind Mick Mulvaney that he is opening a Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville in his home. It's out of code, it's illegal, and he's going down for it.
Just some of what you're going to get from these two coming up here on the Hill. It's the 4th tomorrow, don't you know?
It does look like it.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. A new significant poll out during the last few hours with news that Democrats should fear, quite frankly. The poll from the New York Times and Siena College shows Donald Trump expanding his lead over President Biden following their debate last week. Earlier today, the Biden campaign tried to get ahead of the bad numbers in a memo obtained by NewsNation, saying the Times, quote, themselves acknowledge that they are often a polling outlier, end quote. That laugh you hear is from the man himself, Chris Steyerwalt, who is here to break it all down. Chris.
Have you ever heard anybody complain about a poll they were winning? Never once have I had a politician say that the polls are wrong when they're ahead. Okay. So, New York Times, Siena poll, and people freaked out. Here's the headlines. You've seen them. Trump widens lead on Biden after debate in highly anticipated poll. That's good PR for your poll if you can get it to be called highly anticipated. I've done a lot of polls in my life. I never get that. Trump widens lead after Biden debate debacle. The New York Times says about itself. And another crushing poll for Biden shows Trump pulling ahead. So what did it show? Here you go. Now, these are the numbers with likely voters. And it's a little early to do a likely voter screen, but this is a rematch election, so I'm pretty comfortable going to a likely voter screen so early in the process. Pre-debate, there it is. Post-debate, there it is. Now, what do you notice about those numbers? So this is where we get to play Choose Your News. What story do you want to tell yourself out of this? Now, those headlines match the narrative, Daily Beast, another crushing poll. This matches the narrative of Biden is sunk and it's over, if you want it to match that narrative. But then if you squint, you could tell yourself another story, which is Donald Trump didn't really go up much. He went up a point. That's a statistically insignificant increase. Yes, Biden went down a point, but that's not that significant. That's not a huge number. Among registered voters pre-debate, this is a larger group, 48 to 42, went to 49, 41. So again, just a little bit of movement. But let's look at the other story you could tell. Here are the general election poll movement for Biden among independents. Pre-debate, 40. Post-debate, 42. He went up, you say, among independents. Among Democrats, 94% to 91. He went down with Democrats. We can attribute most of Biden's decline, here in the polls, to Democrats. Not anybody more so than Democrats. And when we look at what Democrats are saying, 2024 general election poll among Democrats on Biden, it's 57% pre-debate say that he should remain the nominee. That drops down to 49%. Is too old, 48% to 60%. So here's the deal. Joe Biden was losing this race going into that debate because it was basically tied, and we all know, and I get to tell you every other day, that Democrats need to win the national popular vote by more than 3 points because of the swing states swing right. So he was going to lose going into the debate. He needed to reset the race. Now he's losing, right? He's not tied, almost getting into a tie. He's losing. The argument that Joe Biden can make to the Democratic Party is, I have 10 weeks to the next debate. I can claw my way back into almost a tie with Donald Trump. And then if I hit it right at the next debate on September 10th, I can win. That's a pretty preposterous argument, but it is a better argument to make when Donald Trump's not getting a windfall from Joe Biden's loss.
Steyerwalt breaks it down.
One thing he can't do this time, though, is hide in the basement again like he did last time. And so I think people are going to continue asking him for, as the congressman said earlier, some sort of press conference, more speeches to me are nothing because he's reading the teleprompter and so whatever.
Yeah. And as a Democrat, we've now seen, correct me if I'm wrong, CNN, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Chris, all come in basically like 6, 7, 8 points, right?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because the new Wall Street Journal poll that just came out as we were getting ready to start the really big show said that Biden went from 45% in February to 42% now. Trump went from 47 to 48. So it's the same story. And this is what's infuriating and frustrating for Democrats, which is Trump is a terrible nominee for Republicans.
Right.
He's an awful, awful nominee, and he's eminently beatable. And they're frustrated because they can't do it.
And that's the infuriating, frustrating part for you?
Well, I think that what you see here is that there's a ceiling for Donald Trump, no matter what's going on with Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. And he's pretty much at that ceiling. There's not a whole lot of new ground of people who are going to go, I all of a sudden really like Donald Trump. I'm going to vote for him. I think the danger for Biden and Democrats is there is this group of people who, when they see things like what happened at the debate, they're just going to go, I'm just not voting. I'm just not going to deal with it.
All right, still much more ahead. Here on the Hill, on the other side of the break, Kelly Meyer on the shotgun meeting happening at the White House in 4 minutes' time. What Kelly is hearing about the governors who were suddenly summoned to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You see the Marine standing out front there?
He got the shotgun?
No, he doesn't.
That means the president's in the Oval.
And our buddy Doug Mills, who's the best photographer on the planet from the New York Times. When the Marine stands, I'm serious, when the Marine stands out front there, that means that the president is in the West Wing, which is how we know this meeting is happening. And Hot Mike with Mick Mulvaney, the former Trump White House chief of staff, tells us why Donald Trump is staying relatively silent and why Ivanka Trump is suddenly talking. We'll get back to Mick and Kelly on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. Back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Live look at 1600 Penn right now, where President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are set to meet with over 20 Democratic governors in a last-minute meeting as the fallout from the president's debate performance continues. Kelly, this was not on the schedule, as far as we know, as recently as 48 hours ago. And here we are with the president trying to shore up support.
Yeah, even 24 hours ago, I was talking with sources at the White House, and they were saying, it could happen in the coming days. We're still trying to get this together because the governors themselves had their own call on Monday together without the president. Then we know that the White House says they reached out to these governors, and now over 20 of them are attending, some in person, some online, but it's happening at 6:30 on a Wednesday night, right before the 4th of July.
Before the 4th.
These folks flying in, including California Governor Gavin Newsom. You can see some of them there. Andy Beshear from Kentucky, Pritzker in Illinois, Wes Moore, Gretchen Whitmer of
Are you
Michigan.
talking about the governors in person or the possible 2028 field?
It's
really the question.
Exactly.
It could go either way,
Right.
yeah. But it's a big moment. And I think also showing to folks the president's working past 4, as some of the reports have been saying. He stopped. So he's trying to show he's out there. But it'll be really interesting to see if we can hear what comes out of this meeting.
Indeed, that meeting underway at the White House. Thank you, Kelly. All right, come on back, Mick Mulvaney. Time for Hot Mike with Mick, the former congressman, budget director, White House chief of staff, tells us what he's hearing, what he's thinking. All right, Mulvaney, Donald Trump, the showman, always likes to be front and center. You know what he's doing right now? Sitting back, letting all this play out. What's the thinking there? What are you hearing from the RNC and in your Republican circles?
A couple different things, a couple different possible explanations. Number one, it's axiomatic in this business that when your opponent is digging a hole, you don't take away his or her shovel. Now, Donald Trump broke that rule back in the first debate in 2020 when he continuously interrupted Joe Biden when Joe Biden was going off down all sorts of tangents in that debate. And it may well be that Trump and his campaign team simply learned that lesson the hard way and decided, you know what? There's nothing really we can add here to make this any worse for Joe Biden, so let him keep digging the hole again. Biden has had just not just a miserable debate, a miserable several days after the debate. So on that front, it could just be a good decision. The other thing I'm hearing, though, is that, listen, they're watching the news just like everybody else. And I got to tell you, if I'm Donald Trump, I'd rather run against Joe Biden than just about anybody else, with the possible exception of Kamala Harris. But I got to feel like I'm walking into the White House against Joe Biden. Everybody else, I don't know. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe they don't want to beat up too hard on Biden and hope he stays in the race.
All right. Well, someone we don't hear from often, Mick, these days, Ivanka Trump. She sat down with Lex Friedman, the podcast host, wide-ranging 3-hour interview, and among the topics, why she was in the White House with her father.
Yeah.
When my father won, he asked Jared and I to join him. And in asking that question, keep in mind he was just a total outsider. So there was no bench of people as he would have today. And so when he asked us to join him, he trusted us. He trusted in our ability to execute.
All right, so that's why she went the first time. But, Mick, I want you to listen here. It seems like she shuts the door on any possibility of, if there's a second term, her and Jared going back. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Politics is a pretty dark world. Like, there's a lot of darkness, a lot of negativity, and it's just really at odds with what feels good for me as a human being. So for me and my family, it feels right to not participate.
What'd you hear there, Mick?
I think she's telling the truth. I really do. I think they liked being there, but now they've seen what it's like on the way out. And politics is a rough business. There's no question, especially if you have young children like they do. And to be a Trump is just a miserable thing to do when it comes to dealing with the media and so forth. But what a lot of folks don't recognize is that Jared and Ivanka both have a very good relationship with the folks that run the Drudge Report, one of the leading news aggregators for the right wing in this country. And that story is still up right now on the Drudge Report. It's got a very flattering picture of her surfing and so forth like that. If you wanted to start to lay the foundation to try and see if there's an appetite in the public for Ivanka to come back, this is exactly how you would do it. And let's make one thing perfectly clear.
In the same role?
If Ivanka Trump wants to come back into the second Trump administration, she's going to come back into the second administration. And if Jared comes with her, then Jared comes with her. I don't think Donald Trump can say no to his daughter. She's the brains of the operation. She's extraordinarily bright. She did a great job in the first administration. Jared Kushner probably would have won a Nobel Peace Prize if it wasn't the Trump administration. If she wants back in, she's coming back in. And when I saw that on Drudge Report today, I put all the things she said in that podcast aside and said, wait a second, this is Drudge. Maybe there's more to this than meets the eye.
All right. Mick, it is one of the greatest portfolios of all time. And it comes from the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. When she discloses her trades, the markets watch and follow. And her latest filing out today shows a number of new moves, including big purchases of NVIDIA and Broadcom shares and the sale of her Tesla stock. Now, once this news dropped, NVIDIA jumped more than roughly 5%. Mick, NVIDIA is up 250% since her first buy. I hear you laughing. Her calls are up 600%. But that portfolio, anyone would want it and everyone would beg for it. What do you make of Nancy Pelosi, this portfolio that her and her family have built while she was the top Democrat in Congress?
So let me give you both sides of this. Her husband is a professional at this. He's one of the leading, investors in the country. Her husband, Paul, has done this for a very long time. The man is very, very wealthy and good at this. So every time you see a disclosure by Nancy Pelosi, you have to recognize that's her and her husband. Doesn't mean she's in there, picking stocks in the office. That being said, this looks terrible. And they should go ahead and make changes on this. I think we had Ro Khanna talking about this on the show a couple of weeks back about making these sorts of changes because it just looks like it's improper. proper. And keep in mind, and I've been in both the executive branch and the legislative branch, the rules are different in the White House. The only thing that I was allowed to own under the ethics rules down in the White House were widely held mutual funds. I couldn't even own specific industry ETFs, let alone individual
stocks. That was the same for me when I worked at a business network. All right, I wasn't making laws. I was just covering what was going on, but that's what we couldn't do. Yep. Couldn't buy individual stocks. You could buy broad stuff, but not,
Listen, we struggle with faith in institutions right now. We would love to take some steps to rebuild some faith in the institution of Congress, and having Congress people not allowed to own individual equities, industry ETFs would be a great move in the right direction. I don't think you'll see it until after Nancy Pelosi is gone.
Boy, Mick, I'll tell you, my former boss and your former colleague, Darrell Assa, would hit you with the 2x4.
Yeah, he would.
All right, that is hot Mike.
Not just over this, Kurt. I got news for you. So he'd hit me for a bunch of different reasons.
We'll leave it there. Hot Mike with Mick. You and Mrs. Mulvaney and your family, enjoy the 4th, sir.
Thanks, y'all. See you Friday.
You got it. All right, coming up here on the Hill. It's been a hot summer for parts of the nation, so should we mandate breaks for workers when the temperatures climb? The new proposal from the White House, how that could work, and what it could mean for your wallet. A live look right now at the White House. Do you know we touched 90 here today in D.C. We're back in a few.
NewsNation tomorrow.
We have made a new beginning, but we have only begun.
Reagan, like you've never seen before.
Tear down this wall.
Reagan, Portrait of a Presidency. Tomorrow at 8/7 Central on NewsNation.
Of the South and out west as well. This is a live look at Sin City as temperatures there hit 112 degrees. Oof. This comes as the Biden administration is now proposing a new federal rule to protect millions of workers from what they describe as extreme heat across the nation. Now, if enacted, it would be the first federal heat safety standard for people working inside and outside. Here are just some of the proposed requirements for employers. At temperatures of 80 degrees, you would have to monitor employees for heat stress and supply shaded and break areas along with water. And at 90 degrees, employers must give a minimum 15-minute paid rest break every 2 hours. Our next guest says many of these heat safety requirements are already being used to protect workers in the construction industry. And joining us now is Brian Turmail. He's the vice president of the Associated General Contractors of America. Brian, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. You are for this. Explain why.
Well, as you said, a lot of the measures that are outlined in this new rule really essentially won't fundamentally change what firms are doing to protect workers from the heat. And that's for 2 reasons. One, because firms have long been required to protect workers from heat exposure under what's called this general duty clause in the OSHA Act, the original OSHA Act. And 2, we actually work very closely with OSHA officials to help educate them about what the construction industry does to protect workers from the heat. This isn't something that's new. Yes, we have longer and hotter summers, but we've long had people working outside as long as we've been doing construction. And the basic tenets are water, rest, shade, and training. And this rule really does a good job covering water, rest, and shade.
So OSHA, for the folks at home, is the government agency that looks over occupational health and safety standards. I know you say that you're doing this, but this would be a mandate, right? This would be a government rule. And when I look at the 15 minutes break every 2 hours, I could give you a laundry list of examples, but let's just go through a few that I just made up. Lifeguards at pools, you got to shut down the pools. Umpires at kids' games, stop the games. What about the National Football League, Major League Baseball? Are we going to stop the games there for 15 minutes? Fishing guides, you're out on the boat, it hits 90, need a break. Is that what we're really going to do here? Is that what we're really going to mandate?
Well, I get the luxury of worrying about the construction industry just because they pay my salary. And this is something that we already do in construction. And you've got multiple people working on a job site. So you just rotate out who's in the Mr. 10 or who's in the air-conditioned job site trailer for their 15-minute rest period. I would say that the one contention we've got with what federal safety officials have done here is they are attempting a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach in that they've got the same heat triggers for the entire country. But 90-degree day in Vicksburg, Mississippi in July is going to affect a worker very different than a 90-degree day in Fairbanks, Alaska in July.
Yeah,
because
I'm
where they
born
are
and raised in
acclimated.
Miami, Yeah,
yes, I'm from South Florida as well. But so we would like to see a little bit more recognition of regional weather patterns. The other thing that's missing is that training part. Heat safety doesn't start at the job site. We spend a lot of time as industry working to educate workers about the need to hydrate, to avoid heavy consumption of alcohol or caffeinated beverages, and to be careful about what kind of medicines they're taking, and just knowing whether those medicines might dehydrate them. Unfortunately, the rule misses some of the focus on training that's long been in industry practice, but certainly, from a construction point of view, yes, we long put people into rest because it's an outdoor activity.
Isn't this, though? Yeah, I hear you, Brian. Isn't this, though, inflationary? Because if you're going to mandate this on folks, a 15-minute rest every 2 hours, let's just go for 8 hours, right? You're either going to get 7 hours of work that when you normally paid for 8, or you got to pay for 9 to get the full 8. And in a time when inflation is still ripping, this would hurt the wallets of consumers and businesses alike, would it not?
Again, on the construction point of view, you're going to lose a lot more money if you've got a worker who passes out because of heat exhaustion and you've got to shut the job site down while you wait for the ambulance to show up and take that person to the hospital. So at least in construction, we have an ability to provide that 15 minutes of rest and at the same time continue to build what the nation wants in terms of infrastructure and economic development projects.
All right, Brian Turmel, we got to leave it there. Hope you enjoy your 4th, sir. Stay cool out there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You got it.
This is why I'm a Republican.
Explain.
Because I think this is going to kill small businesses. I mean, I just think this overreach of the federal government is ridiculous.
That's what every Republican says about every possible regulation. Every time we have one, it's going to kill small businesses.
So it is going to kill small businesses. So if you have 6 employees and you have
small business workers dying,
you obviously want
drinking water.
You obviously want to protect workers,
I just
right?
Rolled my eyes.
But isn't this if not this, then that, right? Because this is just simple, basic math. If you were going to mandate rest, you either get less output or pay more for the exact same thing.
Exactly. But we're also living at a time now where extreme heat and extreme weather is pervasive. It is spreading. It's happening earlier. It is lasting longer. That is also going to have a debilitating effect on workers who especially work outdoors. That's going to impact productivity no matter what.
We're bringing up climate change now.
I'm just saying Republicans are the ones. Republicans who care so much about businesses have done a heck of a lot to sabotage our climate, which is going to make it harder to do business.
You're leaning back because?
I don't want to get into it. But 90 degrees in Nevada is very different than 90 degrees in Massachusetts, and I don't think there's probably a uniform standard that would work for all 50 states, and it's probably something that would be best done by state.
In which you got to wonder if some of this is just campaign.
Are you suggesting that this is an election year measure that is designed to bring up concerns about climate change and suck up the workers? No.
Campaign messaging. Coming up here on the Hill as we head into the 4th, you might be hitting the road soon. May have already done so. Did you think airline tickets have climbed sky high? Well, I spoke with the points guy earlier today, and I'll share with you what he told me and how you might want to look twice at those ticket prices. You are watching The Hill on NewsNation. Also on the other side of the break, the big story and some new information. We'll bring it to you. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. We continue to follow the big story of the day, of the week, of the year. New reporting from the Washington Post, quote, President Biden and his senior team said they accepted Wednesday the grim ultimatum they have been hearing from almost all quarters of the Democratic Party this week: quickly demonstrate his fitness for office or face a significant effort for him to step aside. Chris.
Yeah, this interview that he's going to do with George Stephanopoulos, the campaign and the White House are piling an enormous number of chips on this. And I would only remind them that it was George Stephanopoulos who took out his former boss, Hillary Clinton, when she was running against Barack Obama in 2008, when he threw her in the Sarlacc pit of a debate, and that was really the beginning of the end for Hillary Clinton in 2008. This is a real high stakes, a huge gamble that they're taking here, and with a president who they obviously don't feel can do what is the appropriate, necessary thing, which is that already he would have walked out to the Blue Goose, he would have walked out to that lectern in the Brady press room and done it. And he would have talked to reporters and people would have said, oh, he was having a bad night.
You think this is, Kurt, possibly the most important interview since Sarah Palin?
Yeah, I mean, for the people out there who say TV is dead, news is dead, journalism is dead.
I am bullish.
This is an example of why it matters. The institutional credibility of media, of professionals doing this job, of journalists. The last time a consequential interview happened that impacted the vector of a presidential race, in my opinion, was that Palin-Katie Couric interview. That was the beginning of the end of the whole dance with Palin, all the polling cratered after.
Russia?
From her house?
Yeah.
No, that was Tina Fey on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, right, that wasn't really real.
That wasn't real, but I think that the stakes could not be higher, and that if this does not go well, if he doesn't part this big time, come Tuesday, there's going to be an avalanche of Democrats running away from Biden.
New polling, Ashley, from the Wall Street Journal. So we've had two huge polls today. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, both just not great news, at least at the top line level for the current president. The new numbers here, Ashley, show the major problem.
You know what I want to see is what Bob Casey from Pennsylvania, Senator Casey, Senator Tester, what their internal polls are showing in regards to Elise Lockett in Michigan, who's running for Senate, what their numbers are showing, because I think that's where the tipping point of him really getting out. Obviously, the congressional members are very concerned, which is why they're stepping out. You haven't heard senators, but as soon as they start impacting some of these people.
That Whitmer told the White House Michigan is out of reach.
And if that's true, but some of that's obviously jockeying.
And I was going to say, with him going to Wisconsin, President Biden going to Wisconsin, I don't believe Senator Baldwin's going to be going to be there at the event with him, though she's saying she has pre-scheduled events and it's 100 miles away. She won't be by his side when he goes.
There is no way she wouldn't be available if it was something.
If he was polling good, he'd be there.
If he was 60%.
She would walk 100. She would walk 100 miles, right?
So as we sit here and talk politics, obviously on this massive story, we also know it's the 4th. It's a holiday weekend. I spoke with the points guy earlier today, Brian Kelly, one of my favorite guests on this show, and I asked him one of his biggest piece of advice is for travelers, and he actually said this as it relates to airfare. Watch.
Airfare has come down dramatically. Well, airfare today is actually cheaper than what it was in 2019 when adjusted for inflation. There are deals out there. You know, there's been excess capacity added by the airline. So there actually are quite a few amount of deals out there. And remember, the U.S. dollar is at $1.07 per euro. So the U.S. dollar is really strong internationally.